Politics is not for the faint-hearted. A screeching U-turn, a leaked memo and fights over cuts. That's just for starters. Two of the biggest players these days are here with us this morning, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, and the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch. And the party slipped behind the Lib Dems in one poll this week. Great to have you here on a busy day in the studio. There's always chatter about these things. I just wonder, who do you both think is more likely to be Prime Minister? Angela, you or Kemi one day?
Keir staying Prime Minister.
But in the future?
In the future, Keir.
In the future, Keir forever and ever and ever?
Well, I don't think he'll be there forever. I don't think Keir will want to do it forever, but for the time being, Keir's there.
OK. Kemi, who do you think will be more likely to be Prime Minister, you or Angela?
I'm working to get Keir out as quickly as possible. Okay. So it's got to be a Conservative Prime Minister, and that's me. OK. Both of you will be with you a bit later in the programme. Keep it in the family. Dame Imelda Staunton and her daughter, the Bridgerton star Bessie Carter, tell us what it's like working together on stage.
We have communicated a couple of times mid-scene about something, and we have understood what we've meant.
Yeah. A stern look, a disapproval?
No, a kind of...
sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry, I just did that.
Morning, and a warm welcome to our team at the desk this morning. Zach Polanski, the Deputy Leader of the Greens, but who wants to be the next leader. Sun columnist and broadcaster Jane Moore, and Imran Ahmed, former Labour advisor and now head of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. Welcome to all three of you. Let's start, as we always do, with what's making the news this morning. There is a lot about the government's angst over welfare today. The Express leads on winter fuel after that U-turn. The Observer says the Prime Minister wants to lift the cap that stops families with more than 2 kids getting tax credits. We'll see. The Sunday Telegraph splashes with Nigel Farage's plan to scrap that limit and restore winter fuel payments for every pensioner. The Mail on Sunday and the Sunday Mirror, though, both lead on a different story, suggesting the security services are examining Russia's links to the fires at properties connected to Sir Keir Starmer. And here at the BBC, we're reporting on South Western Railway becoming the first rail company to be renationalised by Labour. That's happened this morning. There's one of the first trains going off. But guess what? Part of the service today had the worst 3 words in the English language attached: rail replacement service. Yes, the bus. Well, lots to talk about. It's great to have you three with us this morning. Jane, we're about to talk to Angela Rayner. There's been lots of leaks and rumours flying around this week. What does it look to you like from the outside, what's going on inside the government at the moment?
Well, I mean, it's like all things, isn't it? I think when you've had a short period in government, you've waited a very long time to be in power, now you're in power, you start opening the cupboard doors, you realise there isn't the money for all the things that you made the promises about when you weren't in power. And that, of course, is where all the backstage arguing starts. And a lot of economists are saying that Rachel Reeves is working with a possible deficit of about 60 billion. So everybody is now going to have to fight. You've got NHS and defence ring-fenced, but it means that housing, which is obviously Angela Rayner's remit, is going to have to fight for cash, along with transport, everybody else. So, yeah, there's a lot of fighting going on behind the scenes, understandably, I would say.
And the context is the Chancellor's big spending review in a few weeks' time, when she'll allocate the budgets all the way up till nearly the next general election. Imran, you worked for the Labour Party for a long time. You worked very hard to try to get them into government. When you see this kind of angst spilling into the public domain and Angela Rayner's leaked memos suggesting tax rises, what does it make you think about how they're getting on?
Look, I think it's really hard for Labour to now... I spent years and years in opposition. I mean, it's miraculous, but when I started, Labour started losing elections, and when I went away, Labour started winning elections. So you might not want to take my opinion too seriously, but you do need a story. You need to know who you're for, and also who you're willing to pick a fight with. And I think that that's one of those things that requires discipline. It requires the ability to to sustain a story over a long period of time. And I remember admiring how the Conservatives did that, especially David Cameron, Boris Johnson. They had a vision of what they were for. And I really would encourage Labour to be much clearer on that vision, because it has to be. It has to be if they're going to win the next election, and if they're going to stave off a reform government, which doesn't look implausible, remarkably, they're going to need a real story about what they're doing for real people, for working people, for families around the country.
Zach, you're wanting to be your party's next leader. Do you think the Green Party ought to be doing much more to capitalise on the tricky difficulties that Labour's happening?
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity here. We've got a deepening inequality in our society. We had racist riots on our streets last summer. And of course, the nature and climate crisis. Labour are telling a story, but it's a story that's against people who need winter fuel payments, people living in child poverty, and actually they could be taxing multimillionaires and billionaires. And so I want to leave the Green Party because I think we have a strong story to tell that will absolutely capitalise and make sure that we're speaking for all the people in this country that want an alternative to this Labour government.
OK, we'll hear more from all three of you a bit later in the programme. There was a big milestone for the government this week. Its first screeching U-turn, rightly or wrongly, on their decision on winter fuel payments. And as we've been hearing, tensions are cranking up in the Cabinet as we head towards that spending review from the Chancellor. That'll be in a couple of weeks' time. And of course, there's the small matter of handy hints for Rachel Reeves that emerged in that leaked memo supposedly written by our guest today, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, who also has a huge job of getting 1.5 million homes built. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes' time. Let's start, though, with the politics. Do you believe that wealthy people should pay more tax?
Well, I think wealthy people have paid more tax because the Chancellor set out that we fixed the non-dom status. We put VAT on private schools. We were able to raise billions of pounds that has gone into our NHS and into our school system, rolling out breakfast clubs, bringing down NHS waiting lists. And we've seen, even in my own department, a £2.8 billion cash injection into the Affordable Homes Programme to get me towards that 1.5 million homes target.
Pay more tax?
Well, wealthy people are paying more tax, and that is a fact. That is where we're at. And what we've said is we had the highest tax burden on working people when we came into government, and the Conservatives left the economy in a real mess. Now the economy is the fastest growing in the G7, and we're getting on track.
Should child benefit be removed from wealthier people?
Well, again, we've said that we'll look at the child poverty situation in particular, and we want to work to ensure we eradicate
child benefit for people who earn more than £50,000.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on things like that. The Chancellor has already proposed what we've done, which I support, what we've done so far, which is around the non-dom status and around VAT on private schools, which has given us billions of pounds more to spend on our public services, which were left in a real mess.
But Deputy Prime Minister, I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm asking whether or not you still agree with yourself. You wrote a memo that had these ideas contained in it, taking away child benefit from people who earn £50,000 or more, increasing tax on share dividends and those kinds of things that are paid out to people with money, taking benefits away from some migrants. So are those things that you actually believe? Because they are things that appeared in a memo that was leaked that you supposedly wrote in March.
I'm not going to comment on a leaked memo. But what I will say is that me, the Chancellor, the Prime Minister and all other Cabinet members, we discuss these things. It's not rocket science that a government, when you're faced with a £22 billion black hole and some of the difficult decisions that we've had to make to secure our economy, we do have those discussions. But I'm also 100% behind the Chancellor and the Prime Minister in taking forward our programme for government, which has already seen 1 million people get a pay rise through the changes we've made to the low pay. We've already seen that we're on track with housing. We're putting more money into housing than we've done before. The NHS is getting that investment. So we are already have our programme for change, which is delivering for working people, but we know we've got to go further.
And you've made that point clearly, but this memo does matter because it appears to reveal that there are quite significant differences of opinion at the very top of government.
Let me be clear. There is not a significant different opinion across government. The government has discussions. We do that. We do that in private. So I'm not going to comment on any memos or documents that have been circulated. But I can tell you that the government is absolutely 100% behind our Chancellor. And as a Cabinet, we make the collective decisions.
But can you say today, on the record to our viewers, that that memo was not leaked by you or anyone connected to you?
I do not leak. I think leaks are very damaging. I am 100% behind our Cabinet and the decisions that we make collectively.
Could anybody affiliated to you, any ally, friend, supporter of you have leaked this memo?
Well, again,
Are you sure it was no one connected to you?
I'm not going to stray into the leak other than I absolutely...
But you just said it wasn't you.
But I absolutely condemn anyone who leaks piecemeal information about what our government is up to. We work collectively as a government, and I fully support the collective decisions that we make.
And the principle of collective responsibility is an important one, which is why, as you say, leaks can be incredibly damaging for a government. And they also tell us about what is sometimes going on inside a government.
Well, I don't think it does, especially if you only get a piecemeal or some snippet. It doesn't give you a picture of what's going on in government, because I can reassure you that the government is solid as a cabinet. We work collectively together. For example, take the situation in prisons, absolutely horrendous that Shabana, as our Justice Minister, has had to take control of what was a crisis in our prisons. We collectively made that decision. Now, there have been discussions that happen as a cabinet and as cabinet colleagues. They're private. We are 100% behind Shabana. That's an example of how we take things on. And it's not rocket science. That's how government works.
And I want to move on, but just on a factual point, is there an inquiry into how this leak happened?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment on the ins and outs of that leak. I condemn anyone who leaks. We are a government. We have collective responsibility as a government. Any leaks do not help anybody. We take things forward and we work together.
OK, let's move on then to winter fuel, because the government reversed some of its position, having taken winter fuel allowance away from millions of pensioners. Nigel Farage says he would bring back that benefit in full for every pensioner. Will you?
Well, he has to say how he's going to pay for these things. Nigel Farage says a lot of things, but like on my employment rights bill, he voted against it. Now, the Prime Minister said this week that he would like to see changes to that as the economic situation improves. We've already seen 4 interest rates go down while we've been in government, and we're the fastest growing economy in the G7.
So if you've got more money, will you restore it to everyone, every pensioner?
Well, again, the Prime Minister set out that it will be a fiscal event, so that's for the Chancellor to outline, and it very much depends on this state of the economy and how much that we've got, and the different pressures. We've talked about different pressures already that we face, including housing.
That it will be done, whatever it is, whether you bring it into income tax for wealthier pensions or whether or not you set the threshold in a different place? Can you guarantee to people watching who really want to know whether or not they're going to get their money that it will be done in time for this winter?
Well, on your programme, I can't guarantee that because it has to come through a fiscal event and the Chancellor. So
you can't even guarantee that it will be done in time for the winter. I mean, isn't this a bit cack-handed? Because we had for months Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and you sticking to that collective line, that discipline you were talking about, saying we're not going to change it, we're sticking to it, we're sticking to it. This week, the Prime Minister says, oh, actually, we're not sticking to it. But we're not going to tell you for months who's going to get it back.
Let me be clear.
When it's going to happen.
What we had to do to secure the finances of this country. When we took office, £22 billion black hole. My department was in the reserves for many of the key services. Councils were going bust. So we had to secure the economy.
And that meant the original decision.
Well, that meant difficult decisions. But then now the economy is showing signs of improvement. We've had the interest rates cuts. We're the fastest growing economy in the G7. The Prime Minister has indicated that he would like to see movement on this, but that is for the Chancellor as part of a fiscal event. I think that's very clear on the direction of travel and what the Prime Minister has said.
But it's not clear for people then. You're telling them this morning they're going to have to wait months before they know. And rightly or wrongly, that's what you're telling viewers this morning, is that you want to change the position, but you're not in a position for months to say who's going to get their money back or by when.
Well, I'm not saying for months, Laura. I'm saying that this is for the Chancellor at a fiscal event for her to make the announcement. If and when the economy allows us to do it, we will look at what we can do around that. That's what the Prime Minister outlined.
Any chance it will be in June? Any chance it'll be in June?
I'm not going to speculate when it will be. I've made it very clear what the Prime Minister says. It will be for the Chancellor to outline it, but he indicated that he wanted to see some movement when the economy allows.
Would you like the cap on families with 2 children, with more than 2 children, not being allowed to change tax credits to go?
Well, again, I'm not going to speculate on what our government is going to do. What I will say, Laura, is we have a child poverty task force, which I'm on. We look at all the different issues families face, particularly in poverty. Work is a challenge and making sure people have secure work. That's why we've got the Employment Rights Bill and we're improving wages. Housing is a huge cost to
and we'll
families
come to
now,
that in a second.
And we're dealing with the challenge of the housing
policy,
crisis.
This is an important question because the government's child poverty strategy, which was meant to have the answer to this question, has been pushed back. I'll ask you again, would you like to see what's known as the child benefit cap, which is actually a limit on families being able to claim tax credits if they've got more than 2 children? Would you, as the Deputy Prime Minister, like to see that cap go?
Well, we're looking in the round at the challenges. That is one element, but there is a lot of challenges that I've just outlined that affect children in poverty. And I want to make sure we alleviate that. We're already rolling out breakfast clubs, which will save families money. We're already supporting families with a hike in their minimum wage. So there is a lot of work we're already undertaking to bring down the cost pressures that are on families at the moment, which will alleviate poverty for children as well.
And of course, the background to all of this, as we've mentioned already this morning, is the Chancellor looking at the books for the next 4 years. And in your department, there's hugely important chunks of funding for councils that have been cash-strapped for so long, for affordable houses that many people desperately need. How vital is it for you that you get enough money to be able to stick to what you believe has to happen in your department?
Look, it is challenging times, but I'll give you a nod back to what the Chancellor has already done. The indications from the Chancellor from the spring statement was we've already had an extra £2.8 billion into the Affordable Homes programme. The Chancellor has already put £69 billion into local government and are looking at a multi-year settlement for local government. So the indications is that we understand the pressures. It is a challenge, but we want to see reform where we've seen it in special educational needs and disabilities, temporary accommodation, which costs are spiralling for councils at the moment. So there is a real social need to tackle these issues, but an economic need, and the Chancellor is aware of that.
And how confident are you that you are going to get, awareness is one thing, actually signing the metaphorical cheques is another. How confident are you that you're going to get the kind of funding you believe you need?
It's incredibly difficult and challenging times, and we will make that collective decision as a government, and I will support the Chancellor in making that decision. And we understand what our priorities are as a government. We know that people need to see their cost of living coming down, that they need to see opportunities for their young people to get on the housing ladder, for them to have good, secure work, and for us to bring down their energy and utility bills.
Now, your biggest job, as we said, is to get those homes built. The target you set yourselves is 1.5 million by 2029. In July, you said, we've got to get on with it. There's no time to waste. Then in February, you said there were no excuses for not getting going. But then in the last few days, you said, I'm a straight talker. The target's stretching.
I've always said that.
But if you look at the numbers, the evidence is that the number of houses being completed since you've been in charge has gone down.
Yes, and that was
changes
always
you've
going to
made
be
aren't working, are
well,
they?
that was always going to be the case. It doesn't happen overnight. With things like this, you need lead-in. You've seen the changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. We've got the Planning and Infrastructure Bill going through Parliament at the moment. The OBR scored the highest score for growth against that at $7.5 billion, with the changes we've made already. I'm announcing today a consultation so that when developers come forward with planning applications, I expect them to say how many houses they're going to build as part of the planning year on year, to notify the council when they start it, and then annually to give us the amount of houses they've built amongst that target, and penalties if they don't meet those targets.
But the numbers have been going down since you've been in charge, and it's 10 months now. And perhaps the issue is that, look, housing is a market. Builders build if they're confident they can sell things for a decent price. And you have announced lots of changes, planning reform, all those sorts of things, but it doesn't seem to be having an impact on the confidence of the market.
Well, the market is very confident. I speak to developers all the time. In fact, I was with them just on Monday of this week. And what's clear is that they've very much welcomed the changes we've made, that we are starting to see the green shoots of that. That will come through in the next few months. The OBR was confident in the reforms we've made, and we've got to go further and faster. And that's why I've announced today the consultation. And if you land bank, if you don't build those houses quickly, you don't get those spades in the ground, they will be penalties.
It's worth saying to people, though, there have been numerous independent reviews have concluded that home builders don't sit on land The CMA, the Competition Authority, looked at it only last year and they said there isn't really evidence of that. But I want to move on to just
Laura,
focus...
sometimes it takes 14 years to get some of these, once planning applications have been approved for these sites to complete. 14 years is far too long.
Did you threaten to resign over the target?
No.
It was widely reported last month.
No.
So that's not true?
Not true.
OK, well, that's on the record now. I want to turn to something that is of concern to a lot of people in the Labour Party and to many of our viewers, what's happening in Gaza. And this week, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, accused Keir Starmer of siding with Hamas after he signed a joint letter with some other international leaders calling for restraint in Israel and condemning the blockade of aid. When people hear Benjamin Netanyahu's comments about Keir Starmer accusing him of being on the wrong side of justice, should they question if Israel's a true ally of the UK?
No, they shouldn't. But we should always look at what's happening and be objective. And sometimes you have to call out when things are wrong. Keir Starmer has been very clear right from the start. The 7th of October was a massacre for Israel and for Jewish people there, and it was absolutely abhorrent. Hamas has no place in a functioning government, and we're very clear on that. But you cannot block aid where we have a humanitarian catastrophe happening in Palestine. And it's very clear, and that's what Keir Starmer set out, that those aid, that aid has to get into Gaza now, and that Israel has to ensure that that happens.
Given that blockade on aid, given the many thousands killed, given the extent of the devastation that people have seen in Gaza, do you think Israel's breaking international law?
Well, that's not for me to determine, but we've made our representations of concerns around what's happening on the West Bank. We've been very clear about aid getting into Gaza, and we've raised those concerns. It's pretty clear that the Prime Minister has said aid has to get in. The language that has been used by some ministers is inflammatory at best, and that we've called that out and said it's not acceptable.
Yet the principle of whether or not Israel is breaking international law is a very important one. And some of the UK's other allies, Spain has said it, France has said it clearly. The Foreign Secretary said it, more or less, and then took it back a bit later on in the day, or clarified
that's
his
a determination for the ICJ, and we've said that we uphold international law. And we're very clear on that, but we have raised concerns. You'll have heard what the Prime Minister said. Aid has to get into Gaza. The situation and the violence in the West Bank has to stop, and that we need to see a path for peace. We need to see the release of hostages, and we want to see a long-term solution where there is the two states of Israel and Palestine living in peace together, and that's where the Prime Minister's focus is.
Before we let you go, as we talked about a bit at the top of the programme, the government you're part of has a massive majority. You've got a huge agenda. But the polls are pretty bad. It's been very turbulent. And some people in government will privately say, we've just heard from Imran Ahmed, that they're still not really sure what the story of this government is. And they're not necessarily sure, really, still, what Keir Starmer stands for. Do you think you could do a better job one day?
No. I think we're working really hard for the people of this country. That we're not looking over each other's shoulders thinking who can vie for the next leadership.
Not.
Keir Starmer took us from where we were in 2019, where people wrote us off, and took us to a landslide victory. Now, we knew it was going to be difficult, Laura, but it was even worse when we looked under the bonnet and saw how disastrous the economy was after the Tories. But we're rolling up our sleeves and doing the hard yards because we know fixing the economy in the long term and investing in our public services is going to give people better futures. And that's what the Prime Minister's done. 3 trade deals in 3 weeks, which the Tories couldn't get in 14 years.
But it is true.
And they will bring thousands of jobs and support growth in the UK.
But it is true that there are some people in the Labour Party who think that you do have an eye on the top job one day. And that's why sometimes things appear in the public domain about your beliefs being maybe slightly to the left of the Prime Minister, or you being, as you proudly say, being a straight talker and saying what you think. So what do you think? Do you rule out running for leader one day?
I do not want to run for leader of the Labour Party.
Do you rule it out?
I rule it out. I'm absolutely focused on working with the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Look, this is the honour of my life, to do the job I'm doing, to represent my constituents in Ashton-under-Lyne, and to finally have an opportunity to build the council houses we need, to put money in working people's pockets and to support what we're doing through our employment bill. That's everything that I could dream of putting back into people's lives when they looked after me, when I needed it. That's our Labour values, and I will play a role in supporting the Prime Minister and delivering them.
OK, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, thanks. Always great to have you with us on a Sunday morning. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, she told us earlier she would want to be the Prime Minister one day and is confident that she will be. But to do that, Kemi Badenoch will have to perform what looks right now like something of a political miracle. She took charge of the Conservatives back in November, and in January, after a couple of months, her party was neck and neck with Reform. You can see them in the turquoise there and behind the Labour Party. But as the local elections got closer, Nigel Farage's group surged into the lead. You can see the turquoise line going up. And since those local elections, the polls have got even worse for Kemi Badenoch. So what's going on? She's with us in the studio this morning. Welcome to you. Let's talk, first of all, about what is going on politically. You said recently it takes about 2 years for people to stop being angry. Does that mean then you think it will be 2 years before you get close to overtaking Labour and close to overtaking Reform, who seem to be the biggest challenger at the moment?
It's certainly going to take some time, because we just lost an election. We had a historic defeat. And the public don't just come rushing back to the opposition. What is happening is that the government is doing so badly that people are going to challenger parties, to protest parties. And I'm using this time to make sure that we develop a credible agenda. I could have come out rushing out with policies to chase the polls, but that's the wrong thing to do. We need to start doing the right thing, avoid easy answers, and focus on delivering a proposition that will change this country for the better.
But does that mean 2 years then? Do you expect it will take 2 years before you start to see the gap narrow?
I can't say how long it will take. I have been told that it takes about 2 years for people to move on from a government that has just lost. But I need to use this time as wisely as possible. And that means rebuilding my party, but also making sure that we hold the government to account, that we expose some of the dishonesty and the failings which they have had. This week has been an extraordinary week. I was speaking to fishermen on Thursday. They think that they've been absolutely sold out. They think they're going to have to give up their businesses. You look at what's happened with Chagos, £30 billion giveaway for territory that was already ours. You look at the Winterfield partial U-turn. This is a government in chaos.
But when it comes to your plans, Robert Jenrick, who's in your shadow team, he ran against you for the leadership. He said, you have to move fast. He said, I do think you've got to get moving. That's not a criticism, he went on to say, but it's self-evident. You have to move fast or else you create a vacuum others will step into. Have you got that long?
There is time, but there is not much time. He is right. We do have to move fast, but move fast to do the right thing. Right now, we have other parties that are throwing out easy answers, uncosted. They don't have a credible plan. They're just telling people what they think they want to hear. That is going to destroy this country if we allow that to happen. We have an economy where inflation is up, unemployment is increasing, growth is disappearing. We need to have a plan to bring back growth and bring back the wealth of this country.
But you need to beat, at the moment, the polls show very clearly, the person you need to beat is Nigel Farage, who is getting nearly double your support in the polls. Everything at the moment suggests he is your main challenger on the right. We know he's also trying to take former Labour voters, but he's mainly taking from the right. What is he getting wrong?
So he is saying to people that he can do things that he cannot do. They're easy messages, easy answers. We need to make sure that we defeat every party. We are now in a multi-party situation because there is so much apathy and disillusionment with politics. And the message that I have is one that is going to be harder for many people who just want easy answers. But what I have said is we're going to do this the right way. We're going to have a credible plan. We've come out with policies on migration that are different to what we had before. That's something that needs to be toughened up. We've come out with policies on net zero, for example, how we're going to change the direction on that. We don't want the country to be bankrupt. What I will not do is come out and just tell people anything, throw out lots of policies when I know that they won't work. And much of this takes time to work out. We don't have much time. We do need to move quickly. But what the Conservative Party stands for is all the men and women out there who work hard, who aren't seeing a return on the work that they're doing, who are finding the cost of living increasing, life is too tough. Who is going to speak up for them? We are.
But in terms of particular policies, let's take one of them. Nigel Farage has said he would restore winter fuel allowance to every pensioner. He said he would pay for that by closing asylum hotels, which are forecast to cost many more billions than they were originally. So would you, if you make it to Downing Street, restore winter fuel allowance for everyone?
Laura, that's what I've been saying right now. We need to restore it right now. People are asking about what we would do.
To absolutely every pensioner.
What Labour did was a big mess. They've made a mess and now they have to clean it up. We would never have taken the winter fuel allowance away. I want to be very clear on that. We kept it for 14 years. We came into government in 2010. There was pensioner, with increased pensioner poverty. We brought in the triple lock. We looked after pensioners. That's what our party does. So no, we would not have done what Labour did. They've made a mess. They came in with jobs taxes. They gave lots of pay rises to the public sector with no reforms whatsoever, and now the economy is doing badly. They're trying to clean up their mess.
I want you to be really explicit. If you were back in power, is it your policy that you would give back winter fuel allowance to absolutely everybody, millionaire, pensioners, some of the wealthiest people in the country? They would all get it back.
Right, Laura, I'm not in government. I do not have access to all of the numbers. Right now, what I saw when we left government last year, right now, we should just restore it. There is no system at the moment to figure out how to stop millionaires from getting it. For what it's worth, I don't think the people who are millionaires should get it. But right now, we have been voting in Parliament to restore the winter fuel payment. We have been voting for that. Labour needs to do that.
But they have said that
they're going to have a partial U-turn. We don't know whether we're going to get that at the end of this year or not. The announcement that they made about a fiscal event, I heard Angela, it's not true. They removed the winter fuel payment outside a fiscal event so they can bring it back. And I want to be very clear on that. We would not have taken it away from anyone.
But I'm interested because you said there you don't think that millionaire pensioners should get it. So in future, do you see a situation where you'll be saying to the country, yeah, look, most pensioners should get it, that's fine, we would give that back, but actually the very wealthiest shouldn't?
That's the direction of travel, yes, but we don't have a system that can do that. That's one of the things that needs fixing. Our system isn't able to stop millionaires from getting the winter fuel payment. Right now, my concern is all of those people who I've been meeting who need the winter fuel payment and cannot get it. And I don't know what Labour's going to do. They don't know how much it's going to cost. They've made a mess and they don't know how to fix it.
About that. All of these conversations are happening in the context of the spending review, which was a really important moment for any government that's coming in a couple of weeks. I know on point of principle, you've said to us before you'd like to see a smaller state and lower taxes, but where do you think public spending should be cut in that review?
So we've talked about how our welfare budget is too high. We are spending now £100 billion every year on the interest on our debt. We are not living within our means. We are the party of sound money and fiscal responsibility. We need to live within our means. And we talked about how we would make about £12 billion of welfare savings. But at the end of the day, Laura, I cannot set out a full fiscal plan, on a Sunday morning breakfast show. We don't have access to what the Treasury is doing. They are making things worse. The best way we can fix our economy is to grow it. It is not government that creates growth, it's business. And that means we need to stop hammering businesses with jobs taxes and all sorts of costs, which means that they are closing. People are losing their jobs.
But you're willing to say that you would like to see more money come out from the welfare budget. Where else do you think could be cut? On point of principle, I'm not asking for a detailed plan, I'm asking for principle.
The principle is that the government cannot do everything. We've heard Keir Starmer reportedly and Nigel Farage say that they will they will remove the two-child benefit cap. This is nonsense. We put that cap in at a time when the economy was in a better place. We cannot afford that. People are just making promises, throwing out all sorts of things to please people when they won't be delivered. And that is why we have so much apathy. That's why the public are angry, because they're sick and tired of politicians who make promises that they cannot deliver, and I will not do that.
I want to talk about two other issues in the short time we have today. We've just asked Angela Rayner about the Prime Minister's statement condemning some of Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza and the blockade on aid. Your response to that statement was to say that he was careless. What did you mean by that?
Well, look at the context we are in. There are 58 hostages who have still not been returned to Israel. We want to see a two-state solution, but we cannot have a terrorist state running one of those. And the third thing is that Israel is at war, and we need to make sure that the war that they're having, which is a proxy war with Iran, is not one that damages our national interests. Iran is not our ally. They tried to carry out a terrorist attack on the Israeli embassy in London. This is a week where we saw two embassy members in DC killed. So this is a very fraught situation. We have to be very careful about what it is they say.
But are you saying then that a British Prime Minister ought not to look at a blockade of aid, ought not to look at tens of thousands people being killed in a conflict, ought not to listen to the UN chief saying that more than 1 million people are at risk of starvation. He ought not to say anything about that.
No, what I am saying is that you should do it in a way that doesn't have Hamas cheering. Hamas praised that statement. That is a terrorist group. That's not whose side we're on. Israel is an ally. That doesn't mean they're perfect. It doesn't mean that everything they've been doing is right. But if you want to have that sort of conversation, you do what we did in government, which was behind closed doors, and you put the pressure on behind.
So it's wrong to put public statements
sending
out.
a signal to Hamas like that, in my view, does not show that we're on the right side.
But
we should not have terrorists cheering. We should not have terrorists cheering about statements that our Prime Minister has made. And that's why I said it was careless.
I just wonder, is there anything that the Israeli government could do that you would then criticise publicly?
I have made criticisms before. We've talked about making sure that the people who need aid get it. That is something that they responded to. But let's remember, less than 2 years ago, hundreds of people at a music festival butchered, massacred. We're still waiting for 58 hostages. What we need to do is get a ceasefire. And the one thing that will create that ceasefire is getting those 58 people back home to Israel.
I want to just ask you about a question that's an issue reported in the Sunday Times this morning. They've reported they've seen memos that show you ignored security advice when you were in the Cabinet Minister, when you chose to use a Jaguar car and a driver that was not part of the official government car service. Now, this might sound maybe a bit frivolous, but actually security for ministers is a vitally important issue. So why did you ignore security advice?
I never ignored security advice. The driver was security cleared, actually recommended by GCS. It was a contract that had been in place for about 5 years, and I renewed that contract. A memo was sent by someone who was unfamiliar with the contract, asking about security concerns, and other civil servants said there were no security concerns, and that's the end of the matter. But what is destructive is that someone leaks a memo without seeing the full picture. So I don't even have access to those documents, but I do remember. Very destructive. I would never, ever, ever put myself in a situation where security was reduced, and also it would not have been allowed in the first place. There is no way that the department would have allowed me to be carrying official secret documents in a car that wasn't security cleared. It's a nonsense story.
OK, Kemi Badenoch, thank you very much indeed, Leader of the Opposition. Always great to have you with us on a Sunday morning. Thank you very much indeed. And of course, remember, we want to know what's on your mind. What do you think of what you've heard from our politicians this morning? You can email us kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or if you're social media inclined, you can use the hashtag or send us a WhatsApp on 08000 282 161. Let's then get back to our panel, who were, I don't know, were you agog? Were you delighted? Were you horrified? Let's get to it. Imran, you worked for Labour for a long time. Do you feel, having listened to Angela Rayner, like they know what they're doing at the moment?
I got the real sense listening to her that she was being genuinely authentic. She was being really authentic at the end when she was talking about what it is that she stands for personally. Whether or not this government is living up to all the things we'd want from it. I grew up in a work-class household with 7 kids, not far from where Angela Rayner grew up. And capping child benefit at 2, I didn't ask to be born. It's cruel. There are things that the government could do to show whose side they're on. And I would love to see them taking those. And I genuinely believe, listening to the Deputy Prime Minister, that she is someone who would love to see the government being able to take those actions. Now, of course, they are limited.
Do you feel she feels she's got her hands tied behind her back?
But that's there are also, there's money as well. I mean, this is a serious question for government. They have to balance so many priorities, and they also have to deal with the economy. And they not build this economy either. Nor do they build the tariffs and everything else, which is causing global instability right now. So I think they've got an invidious, difficult task.
Jane,
and I believed her when she said that she was on the side of working people.
And did you believe her when she said she doesn't want to ever be Prime Minister or leader of the Labour Party?
No comment.
Jane,
all we'll say is that in July 2022, the domain names Angela for Prime Minister and all the variants therein were registered by somebody. She says it wasn't her.
Well, I've never met a politician who doesn't want to be Prime Minister. Jane, when we heard, though, about the winter fuel decision, I mean, she's very clear. Everyone's going to have to wait. So do you think that's a problem? Because the government sort of ditched the policy, except they've left this sort of hanging around like a bad smell because they can't tell people what the alternative is going to be.
Yes, well, they came in. I mean, Keir Starmer spent a lot of time saying, no, absolutely, I'm going to stick to this policy. I believe in this policy. Now, all of a sudden, the policy, and it's been issued, this new edict has been put out in haste. So clearly there's no kind of strategy for how it's going to play out. And even Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, who talked constantly about collective decisions, didn't know whether it was going to be implemented in September, which is, of course, when the winter starts to arrive. So it all sounds a little bit chaotic, and I do agree it's not easy. I wouldn't go to politics for all the money in China, but the overall thing of apathy, I think, voter apathy, is not going to be improved by anything that we've heard today.
Zach, do you have any sympathy for the position that the government is in? I mean, they did take over at a time when the economy had been being battered because of Ukraine and because of COVID. Public services have had a hard time for a long time. When you look at what they're doing and the sort of straitjacket they're in, do you have any sympathy for them?
No, I don't think it's easy, but I think it's very simple. We actually need to tax wealth and not work. And you asked Angela Rayner several times at that beginning of the interview, will you tax wealthy people more? And she gave you some very small measures that are tinkering at the edges. Actually, if we put a wealth tax on assets of 1%, we could be raising billions of pounds.
But won't they then leave? So you earn less money because all the wealthy leave.
Well, so it's actually a myth. There's a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, who are a group of wealthy individuals who are saying taxes more. Because actually, no matter how rich you are, we all benefit from a more equal society.
There's quite a lot of evidence, though, that many very wealthy people have left the country. If you talk to anyone in the city, that's what they would tell you. And people who put forward suggestions of wealth taxes, when those things have been brought in before, they often don't deliver anything like what you might hope.
Well, I'd refute that evidence, but I'd say more fundamentally, if people don't want to spend money in tax to our public services, then are they really contributing to our country? I'd say more widely on your question, too. Angela Rayner talked about a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. I describe it as a genocide. And when we have a government that are ultimately complicit, in fact, actively participating, by arming them, I think when the public watch interviews like that, it just feels completely disconnected from material reality. And that's both on domestic affairs, but also international affairs too. And I think both interviews are an example of why people are rejecting the two old parties, because they're seeing politicians say things that just materially aren't reality.
Is it fair, Imran, to say that the government's actively complicit in what's happening in Gaza?
I don't think you can say that about what the British government is doing. And I think that, you know, both Angela Rayner and Kemi Badenoch have tried to be as clear as they can about a situation in which terrible thing happened on October the 7th. I remember, you know, speaking to friends of mine in the States where I live, and they said if someone had kidnapped and killed hundreds of Americans, we would boil the oceans to get those hostages back. And I believe them. I think that the problem now is, of course, that in the zeal for both restitution to fix the problem, but also, I think, vengeance. Vengeance is an emotion that can lead to terrible, terrible things. And I would hope that starvation of civilian populations isn't seen as being vengeance, that it's only being, you know, that any actions being taken by the Israeli government are to get those hostages back. And there are many people, including Jews, including the two young people that Kemi Badenoch mentioned who were killed in Washington, D.C., the two young embassy staffers. Here's the great irony. They were killed while they were attending an event on how to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza through regional partners.
It's clearly a horrendous situation, and it's interesting to see how this government's position has evolved somewhat. Zach, let's stick with your pitch to be the Green leader. I mean, you took some of your colleagues by surprise, rather, I think, by coming out and saying that you wanted to be the leader. And when it comes to foreign affairs, we've picked up some unease about some of your views. I mean, you want to take the UK out of NATO, and you also reposted a video last year that claimed President Zelensky was asking for money after peace talks were blocked by Boris Johnson. That is not true. Well, that was a wild claim. Is that the action of somebody who wants to be a responsible political leader? I'm
pleased you're asking me about this because it's important to correct the record. So on NATO, Donald Trump is threatening to annex Greenland. For those of us, or people who support NATO, they've got to find a response to that. That would trigger Article 3. So are we going to go to war with America? I don't think anyone wants that. What I'm arguing for, and I think this is a pretty sensible position, is to say, let's work with our European neighbours. Let's look at new alliances that are about diplomacy and peace. Why are we not spending money on books when our schools are crumbling? Why are we spending money on bombs? So ultimately, what I'm talking about is creating alternative alliances. I've never said we need to leave immediately. That would severely be an unwise thing to do. What we do need to do is have the conversations right now about what do alternatives look like, recognising that Donald Trump is an incredibly unreliable partner that is saying he admires Vladimir Putin. And absolutely, we must stand with the Ukrainians too, in the same way that we stand with Palestinians.
Well, you talk about President Trump saying he admired Vladimir Putin. I want to take you back to that issue of a video that you reposted with untrue claims saying that President Zelensky was asking for money after Boris Johnson had blocked peace talks. That's not true. Is that the action of somebody who wants to be a prominent political leader in this country?
So the video was
wrong to do that.
The video was George the Poet endorsing the Green Party. It was about a 5-minute video, and this was one line in it. He was asking it as a question.
Did you not watch it before?
I think he phrased, do people have questions about what's happened? And I think we should always have questions about what Boris Johnson was doing in office. Ultimately, though, we do have to stand with the Ukrainians in the same way we stand with the Palestinians, because any nation has a right to sovereignty.
But my question to you is, was it a mistake for you to repost that video? We live in an age of misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories online.
Yeah.
You want to be the leader of a big political party in this country. Was it a mistake for you to share that video?
This is the same question as kneecap right now. Ultimately, art should be protected.
I'm asking you a question.
It was a poet giving a poem. This isn't a political statement. It wasn't something I agreed with. This is a poet asking questions within a poem. I think we need to defend artists' free right of expression. And I think for people to ask questions within art is a perfectly legitimate place to be.
So you don't regret circulating a video that including an untrue claim about President Zelensky, the leader of a country that was invaded by Russia, asking for money, and also claiming that the former British Prime Minister had cancelled peace talks in a conflict?
It's an absurd line of questioning. Do I regret posting George the Poet, posting a poem, asking questions about international affairs? No, I don't.
So you don't regret doing it. And had you watched it all before you shared it?
Yeah, of course I watched the poem that I shared.
OK. Jane,
I think ultimately, though, it's about pushing for peace and diplomacy and making sure that on all international affairs, we're standing to always talk about peace and you know, what are the alternatives we can make? Whereas far too often we see national politicians run straight to spending more money on bombs and military.
Jane, what do you think of hearing that?
I just think truth matters. Particularly from people who want to be leaders. And going to what you said earlier about the wealthy and people not leaving the country or leaving the country, you said you refute the evidence. I always have a problem with anybody. If there's evidence, evidence is evidence.
I don't think there is evidence, that's my point. So I think there's been lots of myths in the past, but actually capital flight has largely been debunked.
OK, well, plenty more from you three at the end of the programme, but let's have something slightly different now, because all politics and no play could make Sunday a dull day. We can never let that happen. So time to take you to a different kind of drama, a fictional one, played this time by one of the UK's best known and best loved actors, Dame Imelda Staunton, and her daughter, Bessie Carter, who's known to millions of Bridgerton fans as the uptight character Prudence. They are now starring together in a story of sex and scandal, Mrs. Warren's Profession, a play that was banned by horrified Victorian censors back when it was written in 1893. The mother and daughter are playing a mother and daughter. So what's that like?
Well, it feels completely normal.
It does.
Weirdly. And it's weird that is weird, that it just feels normal. It's, you know, it's a wonderful play, a difficult play, and so we've had sleepless nights and phone each other, go, oh God, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. No, I don't know how to do it. But it's been great.
And normal. It does. It feels like we've sort of done it before, even though we never have. So, yeah.
We spoke to Kate Winslow about working with her daughter in the TV drama I Am Ruth, and she said it was almost like telepathic in a way that it wasn't with other actors. Have you found that?
Yeah, I think there is just a sort of...
If there's we can do a look, we can get it.
We have communicated a couple of times mid-scene about something, and we have understood what we've meant.
Yeah.
So I think there is...
A stern look, a disapproving?
No, a kind of...
sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry, I just did that.
Tell us then about the play, because it was so provocative when it emerged. You know, in the 1890s, the censors didn't even let it be put on the stage for, I think, 3 decades. Mm-hmm. If you're not familiar with it, what's it about?
This play was a difficult subject because it was about sex workers, and not going to give you any spoilers, but of course that's the word brothel was never used in the play. The play was still not allowed to be put on because of this woman's profession, and of course it's about that, but it's also about society, about the inequality of certainly of women, but how society is still pertains today, that money is the big issue.
Bessie, what do you see in the play that's relevant to people today?
Well, I mean, sort of what Mum touched on about the wealth distribution, and, you know, if it really is the biggest problem that we are facing right now in society, and this is a play that talks about money. And I think we're so scared to talk about money and so scared to actually look at the people who have the most money versus the people who don't, and why that is.
Bessie, you're well known to lots of people because of Bridgerton, and you know that was a huge smash hit. You played Prudence, one of the uptight sisters, although she has some fun round the sides, I think. Why do you think it was such a huge hit?
I think it was a really well-timed release. I think it was exactly what we needed in that Christmas. It was December 2020, and I think the world was ready to escape into something that was joyous, hopeful, and a happy ending. And I think, that's the honest answer. I think it was, you know, just a delightful thing to look at, and hopefully a bit funny and a bit romantic.
And quite steamy, and quite a lot of...
Steamy. I never got any of the steam. I got a bit of funny steamy in the third series, but I was never involved in the steam, I must say.
And can you tell us if you're going to be in the fourth series, or are we not allowed to know?
Nope. I can't say anything. I'm bound.
Imelda, also, I must ask you about The Crown, because it was such a part of people's lives in a way that sometimes a TV series comes along and just speaks to people, I suppose, about their country and their sense of history. But you got a damehood at Windsor Castle from the Prince of Wales. Was that a bit strange, given your role playing his granny?
Yes, it was a bit strange. He didn't mention it, I'm delighted to say. You know, you have to sort of compartmentalise everything. You go, that was that job, this is this lovely day, and that, and it was an interesting time that we did our series, because of course the Queen died while we were doing it, so that was very strange indeed for everyone, so it was mixed feelings about it. Of course we stopped for 10 days and then we started filming again, so it was an odd time, I have to say, but it was a wonderful piece of work to do, and I loved it. I loved, you know, being part of that franchise, which had never been done before, having 3 different groups of people playing the same person. So that was a great opportunity.
Back then to the play, why is it, in your view, the right moment to see this on stage again?
Can I say?
Yes.
I think it's brilliant, to be doing an old play that people might have assumptions about. George Bernard Shaw, oh, okay, why are we doing this? But we're doing an hour and 40 minutes straight through, with no interval, with 2 women at the lead, and we're talking about something that we still don't really talk about in our society, which is wealth, money, and
exploitation.
Mm-hmm. And I just think it's brilliant we're doing that on the West End, and that we're demanding audience to pay attention and to think.
And fully engaging with something for a longer time. And we discuss a lot of things in this play, and it feels great to be engaged. I wish I could do that.
Hopefully it rubs off.
Yeah.
It'll rub off.
Yeah. Surely.
Surely.
Well, we certainly believe in discussion on Sunday mornings. Yes. So it's been very good to have a good discussion with the two of you today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now let's discuss something else. Remember last week, Sir Elton John told us he was downright furious with the government over plans to allow tech firms to hoover up content without paying traditional copyright.
You're going to rob young people of their legacy and their income. It's a criminal offence, I think. I think the government are just being absolute losers, and I'm very angry about it. I mean, if it takes going to the court or whatever, we will fight this. And the government are being so stupid. I don't know who the tech minister is. What's his name?
Peter Kyle.
Yeah, well, he's a bit of a moron, sorry.
Well, he certainly said what was on his mind, Sir
Elton
Elton.
John for Prime Minister. He actually speaks his mind.
Well, he certainly told us what he thought, and there's been a lot of discussion in Parliament about what he said and what's happening with the legislation this week. But Imran, now your sort of life's work now is looking at what's happening online, trying to wrangle and deal with the worst excesses of the internet with regulation, and you look at what's happening in countries all around the world. What did you make of what Sir Elton said sort of about this government's attitude to big tech and the relationship?
Look, for the last 8 years, I've spent my spent my life thinking about how we can hold social media companies accountable when they harm our kids, our communities, our way of life, our democracy. And 8 years ago when I started, there was no Online Safety Act. I was the first witness to give evidence to it. It became law in late 2023. It's now 2025, and the question that lots of people are asking are the government going to implement this fully? We need strong regulation, not endless promises of a better tomorrow. And I think that, you know, Elton John, national treasure, I would hate to disagree with him, but he reflects what many people in civil society are saying, which is that we want the government to be listening to parents, the bereaved parents of dead children, like Ian Russell, the father of Molly Russell, who's on my board, rather than big tech executives. And at the moment, he seems to be meeting with them more frequently than with us. I want him to be meeting with me and with other experts more so than, say, the Tony Blair Institute, which has been taking tens of millions of dollars from big tech, from Silicon Valley, from MAGA-friendly, the hard right wing of Silicon Valley, rather than, you know, they should be talking to folks who actually have proven through their efforts that they are on the side of working people, of parents, of normal British people.
You sound incredibly angry, angrier than Elton John, if I can say so. What the government might say if they were here is, look, there's a huge economic opportunity here. Britain has to get with this programme. If we become over-regulated, if the rules are too strict, then actually you're closing down economic opportunity.
But what's the cost to economics further down the line of mental health and etc.?
Parliament spoke its will on a bipartisan basis in the Online Safety Act. So it's a bill that unusually went through a draft bill stage where both houses and all parties came together to agree to take the politics out of it, and then it had a very smooth passage through Parliament. It was pretty unanimously agreed upon. No one gets to, compliance with our laws is non-negotiable, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Elon Musk and his X platform, or the government itself. And so what we want to see, and I do have some faith in this government, I have faith that there are people there who I've known for many, many years,
including the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff he used to work with,
of working people who will actually do the right thing. But we are keeping very vigilant, and if we see the government, not actually enacting, not following through on its promises, then we'll be the first to say that they aren't. At the moment, I can't say that, but I understand why Elton John, Ian Russell, and many others are so frustrated.
Zach, what do you make of all of this? Because it is a dilemma for the government, isn't it? They want the country to be able to take advantage of technology. They want big companies to come and invest here.
Yeah, there's huge opportunities in artificial intelligence, and I agree with most of what Imran's saying, although I don't trust the government on this. I think it ultimately is, again, an issue of inequality. You've got young creatives or creatives of any sort who are just struggling to get by, who are asking for copyright protection, for instance, whereas it feels like the government are having big meetings with big tech. What I'd like them to see is, talking to the trade unions, for instance. TUC are asking for collective bargaining for creatives, and I think ultimately, if we want to make sure that there's innovation and the future in this country for artists, that we invest in them rather than the big tech companies who are sponging off them.
Jane, it is a feature of public life at the moment. There is this, not standoff, but tension between governments and big tech. Who's winning at the moment?
Big tech, for sure. And I think, OK, yes, we do have to work with big tech, but does it all have to be one-sided? It all seems to be that everything is in their favour. And, I don't know about Imran, but, a lot of what I've read about the people running big tech is that it's really all about them, it's all about profit, and they don't really care who suffers further down the line.
OK.
What I'd like to see is a more ambitious agenda from the government. I think thinking about our domestic social media and AI industry as well, and generating that intellectual property here, because that's where real wealth is generated, our own services.
OK, well, thank you all three for your services here this morning. It's a really interesting issue, and we've talked a lot about it in the studio. We know you care about it a lot, so do get in touch with your views on what's happening. Thank you to our trio at the desk. Thank you most of all to you for spending your Sunday with us. I'll be with Paddy a bit later on BBC Sounds for this Sunday's newscast. There he is. Is he going to wave? No, he's got his headphones off, so he's blissfully ignorant. Will Angela Rayner's comments this morning have soothed or stirred up the Labour? Oh, they are. They're all waving. How lovely. Well, let's end with that then. A lovely wave there from the Broadcasting House studio on Radio 4. It's going to be a busy few political days. The government in the next couple of days is going to start revealing more of their plans about how they're going to spend some of the cash they do have, whether on health or construction. and big defence plans are coming down the tracks too. But the context of Rachel Reeves watching her pennies defines so much of the conversation at the moment. There's a lot at stake. I look forward to seeing you next Sunday, same time, same place.